Chapter 193 to 197. The two sides that encountered each other in the forest didn't rush to fight. Under the Tsuejin's mask, Kuroto's Byakugan was activated as he assessed the state of Sasori and Kakuzu. From the first glance, it seems that the injuries that Sasori has are more serious. The loss of an arm is fatal for a shinobi, as it has a great effect on the strength that a shinobi can display. The difference in strength that Jiraiya showed while fighting pain before and after losing his arm is quite different. The biggest problem would be hand sign printing. Not everyone is capable of printing hand signs at the same speed with just one arm. But the case with Sasori is different. As human puppet master, he can control puppets with just one arm fairly well, so even though his combat power would have been decreased, the battle still wouldn't be too easy as long as the puppets he has in his hand are good enough. Moving his gaze towards Kakuzu, Tsuejin found that the chakra reaction he perceived from Kakuzu was much weaker compared to before. The Earth Grudge Fear is a really strange technique that has probably altered his body to such a degree that he is no longer dependent on his normal chakra circulatory system. Therefore, in his Byakugan, Tsuejin isn't seeing any normal chakra veins in Kakuzu's body like that of other shinobi. What he sees is a complex network of black threads that are chakra carriers and are connected to the four cores, which are the four masks hidden in Kakuzu's body. However, he has still not understood the essence of the four masked thread monsters. Therefore, how much injury Kakuzu has incurred is difficult to estimate. According to the rough estimate, he roughly has only about 30% of his chakra. It's either because he has consumed much of it in the previous battle, or he has lost some of his hearts. I would bet on the second possibility. This guess wasn't without any basis. It's because Tsuejin also found that the chakra reaction of the cores was somewhat strange. To be more exact, the chakra reaction of the chest and right abdomen was significantly weaker than the other places, which means that 2 of his hearts were damaged, which means only 3 of his hearts were left. While Tsuejin was in a bit of a bind, thinking about whether to take the advantage of the opportunity and get rid of Sasori and Kakuzu for good, Sasori spoke in a cold tone. "You bastards, you dare to appear before us." As soon as he spoke, he can't help but cough out some blood. It seems his injuries are much severe. Tsuejin raised his hands up and said with a smirk, "Hey, don't blame me. The 2 of you have done such things that would prompt others to hunt you down. I just encouraged Konohagakure to fasten that process. After all, the sooner the S-class missing nin are disposed of, the better, don't you think so? But I have to say, you were able to escape from the chase of Sandaime Hokage. Your skills aren't bad, to say the least." Sasori just snorted. "I will not forget this account." At this time Kakuzu said, "You have been meddling with us. I see that you have the potential, so I am giving you a fair warning. It would be wise of you to not make an enemy of the Akatsuki organization. You will regret it in the future." "You don't say?" "Thanks for the heads up, I'll keep that in mind." Tsuejin nodded gratefully. "You better do." Kakuzu said. "Most certainly, but I don't like to owe others a favor, so I am also giving you a heads up. It's only fair if both sides know each other, right? Therefore, it's best that you know that Amatsukami is not afraid of Akatsuki, so we will be having quite a lot of meetings in the future, I tell ya." Tsuejin said. Hearing Tsuejin's words, Sasori took out a scroll and spoke. "You wanna die, don't you?" Tsuejin shook his head, and said, No, not right now. Don't you see, there are still a large number of Konoha shinobi around. I don't think I need to explain any further." Kakuzu nodded. "That is a wise choice. If we fight here, it will only make it easier for Konoha to get their hands on all 4 of us." Homusubi nodded. Sasori closed the scroll in his hand. "All right, you get to live this time." "Well, now that we have an agreement, we'll move on our respective paths," Tsuejin said. With that decision, Tsuejin and Homusubi gave way to one side, while Sasori and Kakuzu gave way to the other. Tsuejin and Homusubi moved towards the village and Sasori and Kakuzu towards the opposite side of the village. Passing by each other, the 2 groups slowed down. Just at the moment the both of them crossed each other, Tsuejin quickly formed the hand seals and leaped into the air. Ice release, 1,000 flying needles of death. Ice release secret technique, demonic mirroring ice crystals. Homusubi did a backflip while printing the hand seals and threw a few shurikens and released fire. Fire release, great fireball technique. On the other side, Sasori also immediately took out the puppet from the scroll, attached it with chakra strings, and shouted, "Dead bone pulse, dance of the seedling fern." And Kakuzu was also not behind as the 2 thread monsters jumped out of his body. Fire release, intelligent hard work. Wind release, pressure damage. 2 shinobi on each side, for in total, attacked at the exact instant. Boom. 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 Instantly the small forest mountain that they were on shook by the collision of the ninjutsu on the 2 sides. Compared to the small-scale ninjutsu used by Tsuejin and Homusubi, the attack used by Sasori and Kakuzu was undoubtedly much fiercer. It's because they were boiling with anger inside. especially Sasori. He even didn't hesitate in using the dance of the seedling fern with the Kagaya clan puppet. Compared to the 1,000 flying needles of death great fireball technique and the combination of wind and fire release jutsu used by Kakuzu, the dance of the seedling fern is a much dangerous technique. Accompanied by the shaking of the ground, piercing bone spears rose from the ground one after another. Suijin was quick with hands and pulled Homasubi inside the ice mirror that was floating in the air. The bone spears kept rising but didn't affect the two as they were at a higher altitude. Standing on the top of a bone spear, Sasori frowned. That's a surprise, you can use ice release? Does that mean you are a member of the Yuki clan? At this time, Sasori didn't show any signs of weakness, even the blood he seemed to be coughing out was not there. Suijin leaned out half of his body from the ice mirror and questioned Kakuzu, "Hey, didn't you say that we should not fight here? Aren't we going to go our separate ways?" Sasori hummed lightly. It seemed that you were the one who made the move first. Suijin has already noticed that Kakuzu is hidden behind a thick bone spear, and the two thread monsters were speared around. He seemed ready to attack any moment. Understanding that both of them still retained quite a lot of combat power, Suijin did some lightspeed calculations in his brain and said with an embarrassed laugh, while scratching the back of his head awkwardly, Sandaime Hokage and Wicked Eye Fugaku are still around, so let's continue on our separate ways, okay? When Suijin mentioned Sandaime, Sasori thought a little and said, alright, it seems that the attack just now was only a misunderstanding. Suijin nodded, yes, it appears that all four of us had a bit of a misunderstanding. With that said, Suijin didn't deactivate the ice mirrors, just lined them up in a queue and flew away. Whoosh! Whoosh! Sasori and Kakuzu also didn't wait any longer and flickered and disappeared from the forest of bones. Whoosh! 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 Not long after the four shinobi disappeared, Sandaime, still carrying his adamantine staff, led the Umbu members and arrived at the forest of bone. Looking at the endless number of bone spears, Sandaime had a solemn look on his face, and muttered, "This is dead bone pulse, Kekiai Genkai of the Kagaya clan?" While the Umbu spread around searching for the traces of the two members of Akatsuki, Uchiha Fugaku led the members of the Konoha military police force and arrived. Fugaku was surprised when he noticed that even Sandaime seemed to have failed in capturing or killing either of the two members of Akatsuki, which... At this moment, whether it was the god of shinobi or the Wicked Eye, both of them had an embarrassed face. The silence and the Aho crow made the atmosphere quite awkward. Sandaime said with some emotion, "These bounty ninjas are not easy." Fugaku nodded repeatedly, yes, they can't be taken lightly. Looking at the forest of piercing high bones, whether it was Sandaime Hokage or Uchiha Patriarch, both of them had a gloomy expression. In their eyes, or better yet in the eyes of great shinobi villages, the bounty ninjas are just some small-time shinobi not worth putting attention to, unless they try sticking their nose where they shouldn't. Therefore, the presence of bounty nin are generally ignored. But the series of events and the battles that took place today has changed this perception. These two groups of bounty nin cannot be ignored. Unexpectedly, there are still so many strong shinobi hidden in the shadows of the shinobi world. Sandaime thought with a solemn expression while looking at the cold moonlight of the full moon. The increasing rift between the Uchiha clan and the village has already caused too much headache for Sandaime. Now he doesn't even know what will happen to the peace treaty that was signed with Kumogakure. Everything has been becoming messy. Sandaime really feels exhausted. If only Minato was alive, everything would have been gone smoothly. Muttered Hiruzen helplessly. Today Sandaime didn't go all out in the battle. This is something even the Hokage guard platoon could see. The reason for this is very simple. Sandaime is worried that if something were to happen to him, the Uchiha clan will no longer have any scruples and the village will fall into civil strife, and the other village wouldn't let such a chance go to waste. The result, not only would Konoha be destroyed but even the Land of Fire will be plunged into the biggest war ever seen. But now Sandaime feels that he was a bit too conservative. If even the enemy is not captured, then aside from losing the faith of his subordinates, even obtaining the required intelligence of the two bounty nin organization will become quite difficult. Even Fugaku had a solemn look when he thought of Homasubi of Amatsukumi. The sudden appearance of an Uchiha with the Manjikyu Sharingan is not a joke. Moreover, the person in question seems to have negative intentions towards the clan and the village, and if it was really him who controlled the Kyubi during the Kyubi rebellion, and indirectly killed Yondaime Hokage, then that means he will not stop until he achieves his objective of destroying the clan and the village. It's unforgivable. Fugaku made up his mind, he must find out the true identity of Homasubi and then kill him, for the sake of the clan, and for the village. Unlike Fugaku, who was worried, the elites of the Uchiha clan were embarrassed because they failed to eliminate only two bounty nin. Before they were being overly aggressive, arrogant, and overconfident, and now not only was each one of them injured to some degree, but even their faces also had disappointed looks. Even after they were injured or more, they achieved nothing. Uchiha Fugaku is still considering whether to reveal the fact that Homosubi of Amatsukami has Manjikyu Sharingan to Hokage-sama. After all, in his opinion, Homosubi must die, but the pair of Manjikyu Sharingan he has can be used by the Uchiha clan. However, another problem lies here. Will the Hokage faction allow the Uchiha clan to take back that pair of Manjikyu Sharingan? Or will it lead to a more severe conflict? Allowing Hitaki Kakashi to keep the Sharingan is already the biggest compromise the Uchiha clan has made, and it was solely done because of the fact that Uchiha Obito willingly passed it on to Hitaki Kakashi, otherwise Uchiha clan wouldn't have allowed Kakashi to keep the Sharingan. So, this issue is a bit troublesome. On the other side, after getting away from Sasori and Kakuzu, Suijin didn't go all the way in the Ice Mirror and deactivated the Jetsu. After a series of battles, Suijin was a bit overwhelmed even if he has the Ryumyaku chakra, so it was best to not keep the ninjutsu activated for too long. Homosubi asked, "So, what's next?" Suijin spoke, "We will have to return to the village first." At this time Homosubi questioned again, "But how are you going to explain this situation to Hyuga Patriarch?" He knows that it was the Eagle and Cat of Umbu Team 11 who took away Watanabe's corpse, but the body suddenly fell into the hands of two bounty nin. This flaw is too obvious. I am worried that Hayashi-sama will see through our disguise. Suijin shook his head, "You don't have to worry about Hayashi-sama figuring us out, besides he wouldn't be revealing the involvement of Hyuga clan with this incident. This incident was caused because Watanabe deliberately wanted to cause conflict between the Hokage faction and the Hyuga clan. As the patriarch of Hyuga clan, Hyuga Hayashi will obviously not be stupid enough to show the involvement of the Hyuga clan with this incident. In fact, he would be really glad that the two bounty nin took Watanabe's corpse and claimed the bounty on his head. With this, there would no longer be any official involvement of the Hyuga clan with this incident anymore." Shursui was still worried. Won't Hayashi-sama be able to figure out that Uchiha Shursui is Homosubi and Hyuga Kuroto is Suijin? As I said, he won't, even if he might be a bit suspicious, but the fact that Suijin had ice release Kekiai Genkai, so he couldn't be sure about it, because the shinobi named Hyuga Kuroto doesn't have ice release. "And what about me?" asked Homosubi. "Since he can't be sure of me, so he would obviously be unsure about you, we just have to present a good enough alibi and we are all clear for the time being," explained Suijin. Homosubi nodded. After thinking a little, Suijin questioned, "By the way, when you broke free of Uchiha Fugaku's technique, was your Manjikyu Sharingan exposed?" Homosubi quickly said, "With the sealing techniques you engraved in the mask, it blocked Patriarch's exploration, therefore, Patriarch shouldn't have seen my Manjikyu pattern," but he did realize that Homosubi has Manjikyu Sharingan. After a short pause, he continued, "But Patriarch used his Manjikyu technique, and I had to break free of it using my ocular power, therefore if he experiences my ocular power again, he might be able to guess that was me." Suijin nodded, and continued, "Don't worry about it, we will come to that problem in the future." With that out of the way, Suijin asked again, "Given that Homosubi used all his ocular power to cast a genjutsu, what would be the result if he uses a sneak attack on Uchiha Shursui? Would it be possible to defeat Uchiha Shursui?" Homosubi was taken aback for a moment and immediately understood what Suijin was trying to ask. "You mean, that we use the alibi that we encountered a sneak attack from both the members of Amatsukami at the same time, that way we wouldn't be under suspicion?" Suijin nodded. In Suijin's opinion, as long as both Eagle and Cat of Umbu Team 11 encountered a sneak attack from Suijin and Homosubi of Amatsukami at the same time and end up being defeated, then the suspicion would obviously be resolved. After a little consideration, Homosubi nodded. "As far as I understand, the power of Manjikyu Sharingan can vary from person to person, and since Homosubi is very strong and experienced, then it isn't strange for Uchiha Shursui to be defeated under the combined sneak attack from Suijin and Homosubi at the same time. In that case, we will have to carry on the preparation of the alibi." With that said, Suijin started devising the plan to set up their alibi. Might Guy in his monkey umbu vest returned to the village. He didn't care that his breathing was disordered, he was hurriedly searching for the presence of Eagle and Cat of Team 11. The first place he searched for was obviously in and around the mansion assigned to the Kumo delegation, which was supposed to be guarded by Team 11. Even after searching the whole perimeter of the mansion, he didn't find any trace of either of Eagle and Cat. Countless questions were running in his heart. Where could the two of them have gone? If they are not here, then they should have most likely gone in search of Watanabe, or maybe after the two bounty nin? But if that's the case, then why didn't we meet them? If they are not present here, then only one case is possible. Monkey obviously understood that the only other possibility behind their mysterious disappearance is that the two of them encountered the bounty nin somewhere else and were defeated. However, he has been trying to avoid thinking of this possibility, because this entails the possibility of something he doesn't want to think about or accept. But the current situation gives him no other choice, so he returned to the point where Cat and Eagle were stationed, and estimated the possible directions they could have gone. He also ordered some of the Umbu to search for Cat and Eagle. After a long while of searching, along all the possible routes, the team arrived at the woods past the outer walls. Dog and I intercepted the enemy ninja more than a few dozen miles ahead. According to the path that the bounty nin have taken, he should have passed this forest area first. Search the entire forest in this area. Yes. With that said, the Umbu got busy in their search. Monkey himself was not free and continued the search. Not too long after, he received a message from one of the Umbu teams. Arriving at their spot, he felt that the temperature of the surroundings was quite lower compared to other forest areas. This caused him to doubt, and he quickened his pace. Arriving at the spot, Monkey found an ice tree that was covered in some sort of genjutsu enchantment, which was wearing off as it was being cracked by the sealing masters. As soon as the genjutsu enchantment wore off, a hollow ice tree was revealed, and in the hollow part of the ice tree, he found Hyuga Kuroto in his Umbu gear, unconscious and tied up with several wounds. Similarly, Uchiha Shursui in his Cat Umbu gear was also found unconscious and tied up in the hollow part of another ice tree that was also covered inside a genjutsu enchantment. The life and death status of both the shinobi unknown. Kuroto, Shursui. In a panic, he was unable to keep calm and subconsciously exclaimed the real names of his two teammates. 3 days later. Team 11 was currently summoned to the Hokage office. Of the 4 members of Team 11, Hatake Kakashi had his right arm wrapped in bandages, with his face somewhat pale. It seemed that he was injured after the battle. Hyuga Kuroto and Uchiha Shursui also had bandages wrapped over their bodies. The injuries they suffered at the hands of Uchiha elites were all cured. The reason for wrapped bandages is the frostbite. It wasn't strange that both Kuroto and Shursui suffered from frostbite, given that they were trapped in a cage of ice tree while they were unconscious. Among the 4 members of Team 11, only Might Guy was uninjured and seemed perfectly fine and energetic self. At this time, Sandame looked through the report and asked with a tired look, "How is the injury of the 2 of you?" "The injuries will recover soon enough," said Kuroto. Sandame nodded and questioned, "I have read the report, so after you figured out that Watanabe used a shadow clone, both of you rushed towards the Hyuga clan based on what little memory Shursui extracted from the shadow clone, and also used the crow summons to pass on this information to Kakashi and Guy?" "Yes, but unfortunately it seems that Watanabe never made it to the Hyuga clan territory and was killed midway. As for the message passed to Kakashi-san and Guy-san, they did not receive the message. By the time Crow Summon reached their spot, both of them were already gone," explained Shursui. "We reached the Hyuga clan territory and were confused as there was no sign of Watanabe. After confirming from the Hyuga patriarch that Watanabe didn't arrive here, the situation was a bit confusing. We thought of coming to Hokage Tower to inform this matter, but midway we encountered Homasubi. If the description is correct, the person appeared to be suspicious, so chasing him all the way, we reached the forest past the outer walls, and there had a short skirmish when suddenly 2 more with similar disguise appeared. We were unable to resist against the 3 of them and therefore, we were defeated and encased inside ice tree as Guy found us," explained Kuroto. 2 more? Sandame had a doubtful face. "Yes, Hokage-sama, one of them should be Homasubi as per the description, the second one was Suijin, well we don't know the third one, but his element seems to be wind as he has the symbol of wind chakra nature on the chest part of his cloak and a green mask," answered Shursui. "And what about his abilities?" questioned Sarutobi. "He didn't show any aside from taijutsu, but I estimate that his strength is no inferior to the other 2, in fact, from the manner other 2 behaved in his presence, he seemed to be superior of the in terms of hierarchy," Kuroto answered while shaking his head. "His name?" again asked Sandame-sama. "They didn't disclose," Shursui said. Sandame had a frowned expression. Initially, they expected that only 2 were part of this whole incident, but now there is the presence of a 3rd member of Amatsukami. Sandame, Guy, and Kakashi can't help but pity Kuroto and Shursui to have to face 3 such monsters at once. It is no wonder that the 2 of them went missing for the whole night. Sighing lightly, Sandame asked, "And can you confirm that Homasubi had Manjikyu Sharingan?" Shursui and Kuroto had already discussed this part and, Shursui nodded, "Yes, I can be sure of it." Sandame asked again, "Is it possible that Homasubi is actually Uchiha Shinichi behind that mask?" Shursui replied, "I am sorry Hokage-sama, but the mask that Homasubi wore had seals engraved in them that shielded against both the Byakugan perception as well as the Sharingan perception, so it is difficult to judge given the short encounter we had when they conducted a sneak attack." Sandame nodded and said nothing more. Taking a puff of smoke, Sandame thought, Watanabe wanted to cause war, but before he could complete what he planned, he was assassinated by the 3 bounty nin who have high Kage tier strength. Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't know whether he should be happy or angry. He is certainly glad that Watanabe's scheme failed, but he is also angry over the matter that Kumogakure dared to plan such a move against Konoha, and yet Sandaime can't do anything to them. He is also sad over the matter that there are such strong individuals who don't have any scruples of sneaking into Konoha and cause such chaos. Yet he is also happy that the trouble Konoha would be facing because of Bounty Nin would be much less than what Watanabe planned. At the same time, he is also helpless that he couldn't do anything to either of the three parties. Sandaime didn't doubt Shisui and Kuroto's report, because facing three such strong individuals is obviously no joke. The entire Umbu unit combined with Uchiha couldn't deal with just 2 members of Amatsukami. What would just 2 members be able to do in the face of 3 members of Amatsukami? The only thing that worries Hiruzen is the reaction of the Uchiha clan. From Hiruzen's perspective, the most likely possibility is that Homasubi is Uchiha Shinichi, yet Fugaku didn't describe this in the report, and based on what the Uchiha clan has been doing in the past few months, the patriarch seems to be dead set on bringing Uchiha Shinichi back. Uchiha Shinichi has actually betrayed Konoha and killed so many or root shinobi, Hiruzen can't help but be worried. While Sandaime was busy in thoughts, Kakashi said, "Hokage-sama, I can't help but notice one thing." Sandaime turned towards Kakashi and motioned for him to continue. Recollecting his thoughts, Kakashi said, the 3 Bounty Nin of the Amatsukami only killed Watanabe during the whole fiasco. Aside from Watanabe, they didn't kill even a single other shinobi. Even both Kuroto and Shisui were only left unconscious and tied up, encased in ice trees, but not killed. It's strange from the general behavior of a Bounty Nin. Sandaime also had a thoughtful look. He did notice this detail, but he also can't seem to understand this pattern of behavior. Kuroto is okay while listening to this. His face was natural to the situation, and had a frowned expression that also displayed confusion. Shisui also had a frown, but that frown was for another reason. Meanwhile, his heart was beating very fast. Kakashi continued, and the same Bounty Nin, the missing Nin of Sunagakure and Takigakure, killed 5 of our Umbu in just one encounter. Suijin, Homasubi, and the third one, sneaked all the way into the village, broke free of several encirclements, went past so many battles, encountered many teams. During the whole fiasco, they didn't kill even a single one of the shinobi aside from Watanabe. There has to be something wrong with this kind of behavior pattern that completely differs from how normal Bounty Nin behave. Kuroto can't help but look at Kakashi with a helpless expression. "You are needlessly creating trouble for me, Kakashi." Kuroto knew that this detail would be noticed sooner or later, and he is really helpless about it. Obviously, he can't kill the shinobi of his own village if there is no reason to. Moreover, if he was to chop down Konoha shinobi like vegetables, then there would hardly be any combat power left in the village. Even Sandaime felt too weird about this behavior pattern, and couldn't help thinking, was the goal of Amatsukami really the bounty on Watanabe's head? Or was it just to transfer the blame of Watanabe's death to themselves so that war and needless bloodshed could be avoided? Or is it that they work in the sort of a fashion where they don't take even a single extra life aside from their intended target? After all, Kakuzu and Sasori had no scruples killing. Thinking of this, Sandaime made up his mind to conduct an investigation on all the missions the members of Amatsukami have completed through the Black Market Circle to check their behavior pattern, whether they use the same sort of method and don't take even a single extra life, or is it quite the opposite? With that decided, Sandaime carried out some more discussion about the possible identities of the 3 and then dismissed the Team 11. After leaving the Hokage office, Kuroto and Shisui bid farewell to Kakashi and Guy. After walking at a distance, Kuroto said to Shisui, "Select the target as soon as possible." Shisui was obviously surprised. "So urgently?" "Yes, we don't have many options." Sandaime is suspicious. Although we have built a deterrence of Amatsukami, our actions were still suspicious to him. As soon as we cause some trouble like typical Bounty Nin, his suspicion should be lightened, so eliminating a few Uchiha would be the best option. After a short pause, he continued, "Remember to choose a sibling pair as the first target." To be honest, Kuroto is not worried whether Sandaime-sama will figure out that it was he and Shisui who disguised as Suijin and Homasubi just based on their abnormal behavior. After all, no one knows what kind of personality traits does the 2 members of Amatsukami have. What he cared about was the reaction Sandaime-sama would have once he hears that Homasubi has the Manjikyu Sharingan. From the doubtful look that Sandaime had when he read the report, Kuroto guessed that the Uchiha Patriarch concealed this part of information about Homasubi. Honestly, has Uchiha Fugaku finally gone mad? Why not use this opportunity to blame Homasubi for the Kyuubi's attack? Kuroto was really confused by Uchiha Fugaku's actions. In Kuroto's opinion, this was an excellent opportunity. As long as the blame for Kyuubi's attack is transferred to Homasubi, the hostility that the village leaders have towards the Uchiha clan will decrease, and slowly and steadily the 2 sides can mend their relationship. But Uchiha Fugaku concealed this from Sandaime-sama. By doing this, not only did they miss the perfect opportunity to solve their problems, but it also increased the distrust between the 2 factions. Kuroto couldn't help but shake his head in disappointment. Uchiha Fugaku also expressed his true intentions by doing so, and it really disappointed Kuroto. Taking a look back at the Hokage building, Kuroto withdrew his thoughts. Following the rules, if a ninja performing the task fails to complete it, like in the case with Team 11 where they were unable to protect the Kumo delegation, he will be severely punished, so accordingly, Team 11 must receive serious punishment. But the fact that even Sandaime himself was not able to capture or kill the bounty nin responsible, and returned without any success, so no one mentioned the matter of punishment. Therefore, Team 11 not only did not get punished but in fact, they received 1 week-long vacation to perfectly recover from all the injuries that the team suffered. Therefore, the first thing that he did was to go to the Konoha hospital. Their injuries were all treated by the Umbu medical unit in the past 3 days, but a careful check has to be conducted at the hospital. At the Konoha hospital. After checking the injuries on Kuroto's body, the medic nin on duty nodded and said, "The frostbite you suffered has been cured and all that's left are just some skin wounds, nothing to worry about, take enough rest and you will recover soon enough, there is no need to use Iryo ninjutsu." Kuroto nodded and said with an embarrassed look, "I have to start with some serious training, so it would be really helpful if Furofuki-sensei heals these injuries." The medic nin Furofuki-sensei shook her head helplessly and used Iryo ninjutsu to heal all the skin injuries. After the treatment was finished, Kuroto removed the bandages wrapped over his body and quietly left the hospital. The purpose of him coming to the Konoha hospital and getting his injuries healed was just an excuse. Because next he is going to be meeting the Hyuga Patriarch, and since the water clone body doesn't have the curse of caged bird, so he obviously can't use this clone body to meet the Patriarch. After all, Hayashi-sama must have his ways of sensing the curse seal. Therefore, Kuroto can't risk it, he must be in his main body when meeting the Patriarch, but there was a problem, his water body had suffered several injuries, and he was to take the main body that does not have any injuries, then it would be hard to explain, so he came to Konoha Hospital to get his wounds healed to get rid of loopholes. With that out of the way, Kuroto who had changed his body came to the Hyuga clan territory. Hyuga Hayashi was obviously restless for the past 3 days, so as soon as he received the news that Kuroto came to see him, he immediately asked the maid to bring him in. Under the escort of a maid, Kuroto came to the study of Hyuga Hayashi. After the maid was done pouring tea for the two, she withdrew from the study leaving Kuroto and Hayashi. The Hyuga Patriarch couldn't take it anymore. "I heard about everything that took place, who were the 2 bounty nin?" Kuroto just shook his head and apologized, "Please forgive me Hayashi-sama, it would be best for you to not know the details of all the event as we have been ordered by Hokage-sama to not reveal them. What I can tell you is that I and the other Umbu were ambushed and Watanabe's corpse was taken away by the 2 bounty nin, their reason seems to be the bounty on his head." Hayashi nodded. If Hokage-sama has restricted them to not reveal this matter, then Hayashi wasn't going to pressure Kuroto, but he worried nonetheless. "I heard that even Sandaime-sama and the Patriarch of the Uchiha clan failed to stop them and some of the Umbu also died?" Hayashi obviously didn't suspect that Kuroto was one of those bounty nin. For one, the bounty nin seems to be the user of ice release, and secondly, the strength displayed by the bounty nin. Hyuga Kuroto is undoubtedly very strong, Hayashi knows this, but he doesn't believe that Hyuga Kuroto would be strong enough to go toe-to-toe against Hokage-sama. What Hayashi considered was the possibility of a cooperative relationship between Kuroto and those bounty nin, therefore, he asked about that bounty nin. Now that Kuroto has confirmed that he didn't know the two, Hayashi has mixed feelings. Hayashi is relieved that Kuroto didn't collude with shinobi of unknown origin, but he is also worried that the bounty nin took away Watanabe's corpse, which means that they now know the true cause of his death. If they openly publicize this matter, whether Kuroto, Hayashi, or the rest of the Hyuga clan, the implication would ultimately land upon them, and I am afraid that the follow-up trouble would be worrisome. Kuroto seems to realize Hayashi's worries and said, "Patriarch, you don't have to worry too much. Firstly, no one would believe the words of a bounty nin over the words of a loyal shinobi, and the possibility of Hokage-sama suspecting the Hyuga clan just based on the rumors is very less. Besides, even if he suspects the Hyuga clan, he wouldn't make any move without any solid evidence. The same case applies to Kumogakure." Hayashi nodded in understanding. In fact, he also understands that unless Watanabe's body is directly found in the Hyuga clan territory, it would be impossible to implicate or cause any substantial harm to the Hyuga clan. At this time Kuroto said, "Patriarch, I am sure you must have also realized this, but there are still many loopholes that are yet to be filled. For one, how did Watanabe manage to sneak into the Hyuga clan territory? How was he able to get past all the security? Most of all, how did he know the layout of the Patriarch's mansion, that he was able to find Hinata-sama's sleeping quarters? Not to mention, Watanabe, who is a ninja of another village, even a shinobi of Konohagakure shouldn't be able to do this, an enemy being aware of such precise details is quite concerning." Hayashi nodded with a serious look. He has been considering these matters for a while and the only possibility is that there is a traitor in the Hyuga clan, and he is hostile not only towards the clan but also towards the village. Hayashi can be sure of this, because the layout of the Patriarch's mansion is even unknown to the Hokage. Only the members of Hyuga clan with Byakugan can help the outsiders to get past all the security of the Hyuga clan territory and sneak into the Patriarch's mansion to be able to kidnap the young lady. It's as impossible for others to do so. With a light sigh, Hayashi said, I did a preliminary investigation in the past 3 days, but I have yet to find anything or any sign that would give away any clue. Even Kuroto pondered a little. Who could it be? Initially, Kuroto thought that it might be Shimura Danzo, but then he quickly eliminated that possibility. For one thing, Kuroto can be sure that Shimura Danzo is not aware of the layout of the Hyuga Patriarch's mansion. Secondly, Shimura Danzo has no reason to do so. Danzo may have some hostility towards Kuroto, and certain dissatisfaction towards the Hyuga clan for not allowing him to recruit any Hyuga shinobi en route, but Danzo wouldn't be foolish enough to do anything against the Hyuga clan before he destroys the Uchiha clan. Because if he takes any action against the Hyuga clan before that, then the Hyuga would be offended and forced to ally themselves with the Uchiha, and since the Hyuga shinobi are the most amicable in the village, so they would obviously get support from the other major shinobi clans. Overall, Danzo would be offending pretty much all the clans if he takes any action against Hyuga. Besides, Kuroto doesn't think Danzo would collude with the shinobi of an enemy village and let him harm Konoha, at least not until he can be sure of his position. Even if the original story, whether it was destroying the Uchiha clan or letting Sandaime be killed at the hands of Orochimaru, Danzo's main purpose was the position of Hokage, not to destroy Konoha. And the person who assisted Watanabe obviously wanted to drag Hyuga clan into the muddy waters, instigating both the major clan, Uchiha and Hyuga, to take part in a civil war. In other words, the ultimate aim of that person is not only to destroy the Hyuga clan but also to destroy Konoha. And if it can be determined that the traitor is an insider, then the scope of the investigation will be narrowed. All the members of the main branch can be excluded because they enjoy the power and status brought by the clan. They wouldn't have any reason to betray the clan. Even among the members of the branch division, the number of people who are truly dissatisfied or have a conflict with the main family wouldn't be too many. As long as those people are checked one by one, then the traitor can be easily identified. Hayashi said, well, I will keep an eye out on that matter. Kuroto nodded. He doesn't need to mention this matter to Patriarch. As the leader of the clan, Hayashi-sama would surely give his all to narrow down the traitor. With that out of the way, Hayashi finally heaved a relieved sigh, and said, putting aside that matter, I must express how grateful I am to you, Kuroto-kun. No matter how the situation turned out because of the intervention of Bounty Ninja, your timely response to resolve the crisis is something I am very grateful for. Kuroto shook his head, and said, this is just my responsibility as a shinobi of the Hyuga clan. If Hyuga clan faces hardship, then I have to help out in any way I can. Hayashi smiled, be that as it may, I would like to reward you. Speak your desire, as long as it is within an acceptable range, I will see that it is fulfilled. Rejecting Patriarch's good intention would be disrespectful, so Kuroto was silent and thought, what can I ask? Hayashi didn't disturb Kuroto and allowed him to think carefully. After some consideration, Kuroto spoke, Hayashi-sama must be aware that during the incident, Yui encountered the Bounty Nin. Although I am happy that she wasn't seriously injured, the matter could have gone worse. Is it possible for her to be transferred and receive formal training of the main family techniques? Hayashi was surprised and questioned, if I am not wrong, you have mastered the techniques of the main family, have you not? Kuroto nodded, he has indeed mastered the techniques, there was no reason to hide it. So, why not teach her yourself? There was no reason to ask. Asked Hayashi. I am mostly busy with the Umbu missions and therefore, it is not possible for me to help her in her training. Moreover, her combat style is a bit varied and quite different from mine, so I am not sure if I will be able to train her. If Himeji-sama would be willing to train Yui. Hayashi was silent for a while, and after a little consideration he finally nodded with a smile, alright, Yui's talent is good, so it would be worth it, I will see that it happens. Kuroto bowed to Hayashi gratefully. Hayashi just smiled and said, don't worry Kuroto-kun, the times are changing. I think it is also time for the stuck-up Hyuga clan to change. It would be a bit objectionable, but I will see that certain things are changed, you needn't worry. I think Himeji will also be happy to have Yui as her disciple. Uchiha clan. Uchiha Fugaku sat in his study doing some paperwork. Knock. 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 At this time, a knock came from the door. Come in. Followed by the command, the gate was opened, and Uchiha Shursui entered the room. Patriarch, you wanted to see me? Asked Shursui. Fugaku didn't raise his head from the report he was reading and just said, sit down. Yes. Said Shursui and took his seat. For a while, there was silence and just the sound of paper scratching resounded as Fugaku was finishing with the paperwork. Shursui did not disturb, just sat silently. After he was done with the paperwork, Fugaku lifted his head and observed the injuries on Shirsue's body. He had a worried expression seeing those injuries. Fugaku was really panicked when he received the news that Shirsue suffered a sneak attack from Amatsukami. Currently, in the Uchiha clan, only he and Shirsue have the Manjikyu Sharingan. If something was to happen to Shirsue, it will undoubtedly be a huge blow to the Uchiha clan that has begun making preparation of a coup d'etat. After learning that the injuries he suffered were just some frostbite, and nothing too serious, Fugaku breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he was really glad that Shirsue's eyes were not stolen. Perhaps because Sandaime was pretty close at the time, that the bounty ninja did not have the chance to steal Shirsue's eyes. Thought Fugaku, as that could be the only reason he thinks of. As for the real reason, that is obviously different. For one, the ambush part is just made up, but even if it was real, Shirsue isn't much worried, as he has a seal placed on both of his eyes, according to which, if his eyes are removed without deactivating the seal then his eyes would be destroyed. With this, even if someone does manage to steal his Manjikyu Sharingan, they wouldn't be able to use it. Shirsue took Kuroto's help in putting the seal after much consideration. Koto Amatsukami is a very dangerous technique, therefore, Shirsue doesn't want it to go into the hands of someone who could harm Konoha and the Uchiha clan. And only Kuroto and Shirsue are aware of this information, not even Kakashi and Guy are aware of this. Noticing Fugaku's silence, Shirsue asked, "Fugaku-sama?" Upon Shirsue's beckoning, Fugaku put aside his thoughts and questioned, "Describe the events that took place, and how did you end up encased in an ice tree?" Hearing Fugaku's questioning, Shirsue didn't hesitate and reveal the same information as they have revealed to Sandaime-sama, and finally, he said, "I didn't expect that all three of them would be so strong and was caught off guard when Homusubi used Manjikyu Sharingan." Fugaku nodded. Although he didn't know what Manjikyu Sharingan dojutsu Shirsue has, Fugaku understood the strength that Homusubi has, and no matter how talented, Shirsue is still somewhat young, so it's not strange for him to have lost. At this time said, "I can be certain that Homusubi is not Shinichi, he is a traitor and most likely the person responsible for controlling the Kyuubi, although I haven't yet figured out as to who exactly he is. Betraying the clan and the village is unforgivable. I have deployed people to collect information about him and keep track of him. As soon as he appears and we get the wind, you will come with me to kill him. Letting an unstable figure with Manjikyu Sharingan is highly problematic and must be resolved." "Yes." Shirsue nodded. "Also, I am quite certain that Sandaime will deploy personnel to collect all the possible intelligence about both Amatsukami and Akatsuki, so keep your eyes and ears open." "Yes, I will make sure." Shirsue agreed. "And lastly, do not run around carelessly. Both Amatsukami and Akatsuki are dangerous, so it would be best to be very careful when dealing with them, lest damage will be irrecoverable. Is that clear?" Fugaku warned. Shirsue again nodded helplessly. "Yes, Fugaku-sama, I will be careful." 3 days back. Inside a dark cave somewhere in the Land of Rain. Several illusionary projections of different members of the Akatsuki organization could be seen standing in a circle. This is another one of a rare gathering of all of the Akatsuki members. Pain, the leader of Akatsuki, looked at Kakuzu and Sasori and said flatly, "Tell me what exactly happened, in detail." Sasori was silent, he didn't say a word. Seeing this, Pain turned towards Kakuzu, who spoke. "We encountered 2 members of Amatsukami last night. At that time, they seemed to have offended Konoha and were being chased by Sandaime Hokage and Uchiha Fugaku, along with many Umbu and Uchiha clan elites." Kakuzu described the details of the entire incident. Everyone was again surprised by the bold actions of Amatsukami and the fact that they escaped the siege of such people. Pain has to also acknowledge and seriously pay attention to this seemingly new organization called Amatsukami. Hiriko said, "With Yama, Suijin, and now this Homusubi, there are 3 known members of Amatsukami, right?" Kakuzu nodded, "Yes." Shino said, "Are members of Amatsukami really so strong?" Without waiting for Kakuzu to speak, Sasori said coldly, "Are you questioning me?" Shino just smiled lightly and did not speak any further. At this time, Uchiha Shinichi spoke with a smirk. "Do you know why Amatsukami was being pursued by the Hokage and Uchiha Patriarch?" The eyes of all the members turned towards Uchiha Shinichi. Seeing that everyone turned towards him, Shinichi said, "I received news that the head ninja of Kumogakure, who was the leader of the delegation and was responsible for signing the peace treaty between the 2 nations, was killed by the members of Amatsukami for the bounty on his head, and Hokage, not wanting to lose the face of his village anymore, personally chased but could neither capture the culprit nor take back the corpse." "Ha ha ha, it's so funny, the Hokage is completely useless." One after. "Other people are using Konoha as their playground and all he does is sitting in his cozy office smoking tobacco, so pathetic." Shinichi is obviously very happy that Konoha is facing so many difficulties one after another. The Hokage doesn't value his people, he should suffer. As for the question of whether he is worried about being destroyed? Obviously, no. Hyuga Kuroto is part of Konoha, so how could it be destroyed so easily? Pain was silent for a while and said, continue with the missions and keep an eye out for any intelligence of Amatsukami. Hiriko and Shino, you both will now enter the Land of Fire, also Sasori and Kakuzu, solve the matter of Orochimaru as soon as possible and then start an in-depth investigation of Amatsukami. Hiriko narrowed his eyes, it appeared that he was hesitating slightly but nodded, all right. Shino also nodded, yes. Sasori said, I need to remodel my body, so it will take some time. Kakuzu also said, I too need to restock a few of my hearts that were damaged. Pain knew that Sasori and Kakuzu's combat power would be affected otherwise, so nodded, acceptable. One thing I want to warn everyone, I don't care if you all take it seriously or not, but the members of Amatsukami are very cunning and vicious, as seen in both the encounters we had with them, so it would be best to be careful of this. Said Kakuzu. Everyone had a different reaction to this, but nobody voiced their opinion. With that out of the way, one by one the holographic projections of the magic lantern body technique disappeared one after another, and the view of the eternal reign of Amigakure came into the view. Taking a look at the clouds, Tendo Pain sitting on the tongue of the stone statue stood up and walked inside the room. Inside, Uchiha Madara wearing the orange mask stood leaning on the sidewall. As Pain walked in, he questions, so? Tendo Pain didn't turn to look at Madara, just relayed all the information and said, perhaps we have to pay some attention to Amatsukami. In Pain's view, just two members, who aren't even leaders of that organization, played around with Konoha, one of the great shinobi villages, like tools in their hands. The entire pursuing force returned empty-handed, moreover Kakuzu and Sasori were involved in the fiasco against their will. As for how strong is Yama to have shinobi of such capability under his command, Pain knows nothing about it. As such, Pain has to consider Amatsukami a threat, even if a minor one. Should I search them? Asked Kunoichi. She has short, straight blue hair with a bun, gray eyes that are cold and devoid of any emotion, along with lavender eyeshadows, and elaborate piercing. A grayish-blue paper flower clipped on her bun, and fair skin. Finally she wore the traditional Akatsuki high-neck turtle Akatsuki cloak. Pain turned towards the kunoichi named Conan and shook his head, it's not time yet. Because Pain has a feeling that he will soon have an encounter with Yama. Madara pondered a little and said, I will soon be going to the Land of Fire for a while, the Uchiha clan needs someone to add fire. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaioshin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips. If you liked the content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll stay here until next time.